This run-through of the alphabet will give the Hebrew names of the letters, but not their sounds. This is Aleph. Aleph. Again, in two different forms. Bet. Note it has a dot inside it, plugging it up, so the air can't get through, and it becomes B. Bet. Without the dot, the air can get through, and it becomes vet, using both lips, v, like a Spanish B, vet. Gimel. Sometimes this has a dot. In ancient times it was pronounced differently with the dot and without. Nowadays it's always the same. Gimel. Daled. Note that Daled has got an overhang on the right hand side at the top, where my mouse is moving around, and on this side too. And its distinguishing character is this overhang or a sharp corner. Sometimes it's just a right angle. Daled. Hey. Notice the open hole here. Hey. And you can see there's a distinction between how it's formed. It can be formed from a rounded member on the right hand side here, or it can be formed from a daled with a line. Hey again. Vav. Two different forms of vav. Zayin. Notice it looks like a tiny T, and here the same basic shape, the crossbar on the top on the left and the line going down. Zayin. Het. Het is quite a hard letter for most Europeans to pronounce. Het, and it's the sound a cat makes when it's angry. It's not very far back in your mouth. It's not it's het. And notice that there's a distinction in how it's made. Here it's got a curved member on the right with the line going all the way down, and on the left hand side it's formed from this daled with a line joining up. If you think of it like a h, but stopped up a bit, so there's the gap is closed here. This is the same as a h, except that there's no gap, and so h, it's related to the sound of h, but it's a rougher sound. It's closed up. Het. This is tet, and there are two letters with the same sound, but with different names. In ancient times they had different sounds, but nowadays they are both very similar. Tet, and you'll see different forms of it. The right hand side is a more sort of the form you find in Israeli advertising or in a newspaper, and on the left hand side is the traditional form. Sometimes this has a rounded bottom as well in the traditional form. Sometimes it has a square bottom. Tet. This is Yud. Yud, which then becomes the Greek iota, which then becomes the Latin I, and it functions as a consonant, y, and sometimes it functions as a vowel, e. Y, Yud. This letter is Chaf, and notice that it's like a backwards C. This is a final Chaf. In ancient times all these letters had these long lines going down, but they took up too much space, and so what happened was that the scribe took the letter and bent it up so that it curved like that, and you end up with this form here. In ancient times, this curve would have just hung down straight. The ancient form only survives at the end of words, and so here we have a final khaf. Lamed. Mem. This is a mem that occurs at the end of a word. Its distinguishing characteristic is it has sharp corners. That's the main way of spotting it. It's similar to another letter, which has round corners at the bottom. This has got sharp corners and only occurs at the end of a word. Mem. And this is the mem in the middle of a word, or the beginning. This is nun, as found in the middle of words, and nun in ancient times had a long form like this, and once again that this was bent up by the scribes so it would be more economical, and we end up with this form, nun, and nun at the end of words. Samech. Samech has got a round bottom, otherwise it looks very similar to the mem at the end of a word. Its distinguishing characteristic is that it's round and not square, but it's very similar. Samech. Ayn. Now, Ayn is pronounced by Jews from North Africa and from Iraq and Yemen, and in Israel the newsreaders pronounce it very slightly as well. It is described as the sound of incipient vomiting. It's a sort of strange sound. It's ah, and it's very, very hard for Europeans to pronounce. In European Ashkenazi Hebrew, it's not pronounced at all. But it does help to pronounce it slightly, or to be aware that it actually does have a sound. Ayn. Ayn. The sound a crow makes. Ah. Ayn. This is the letter Fe. When it has a dot inside it, the air can't get through and it becomes Pe. So when it's open with no dot, no plug in it, it's Fe. And when it has this dot, this dogish inside it, as the dot is called, then it becomes Fe. Once again, in ancient times, this had a long form, which then got bent up by the scribes to save space. This is the form that occurs at the end of words. Fe, and if it has a dot, Pe. This letter is Sadi, and as you can guess, it's curved around at the bottom, indicating that it had in ancient times a final form which was very long, and here it is. Sadi. Kuf. Resh. Now Resh is not to be confused with Daled. It has a curved back to it. Resh. The next is Shin, which has got two forms, and finally the last letter, Tav.